In 2024, a Brazilian phonk track, a South Korean pop group, a Japanese man in a high school classroom produced 44 million views in 4 days. Nobody planned the combination. Nobody pitched it in a boardroom. Nobody ran the demographics or stress tested the concept across focus groups. It just happened, the way the best things on the internet always happen, because one person spent years building something so structurally clean and so genuinely joyful that when the right moment arrived, the whole world showed up without being asked a yes. That person is Koyama Ginjiro, and what he built is not a viral moment. It is a viral language, one that has been spoken across Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, Brazil, and everywhere in between without anyone needing a translator. Most of the Western internet still cannot pronounce his name. That will change. Here is why it matters. To understand Ginjiro's cultural footprint, you have to understand what the short-form dance content world looked like in 2020 and 2021, when TikTok finished its takeover of the global attention economy. The dominant format had already calcified into something almost universal. A creator performs choreography on camera, usually facing forward, usually alone or in a small group, usually in a domestic setting. The performance is the product. It is clean, it is repeatable, and it generates engagement efficiently. But it also has a ceiling built into it because the viewer always knows exactly what they are watching from the first frame. The surprise is cosmetic at best. The structure never changes. Ginjiro changed the structure. What he developed was not just a new way to film a dance video. It was a new way to make an audience feel something. His format places the viewer inside an unfolding event rather than outside a performance. The camera moves through ordinary spaces, ordinary people doing ordinary things, and then a song arrives and the ordinary world transforms completely and perfectly into something choreographed and euphoric. The transition from normal to extraordinary happens inside the frame in real time, and the viewer is present for it in a way that feels participatory rather than passive. It is the difference between watching a firework and standing underneath one. The environments he chose mattered enormously to why the format worked. Not stages, not studios, not bedrooms, high school classrooms, gymnasiums, hallways between classes. The mundane infrastructure of daily Japanese student life became his canvas. And that specificity of setting was not accidental. There is something universally recognizable about a school hallway, regardless of what country you grew up in. The fluorescent lights, the lockers, the feeling of being somewhere slightly boring, slightly restless, slightly waiting for something to happen. Ginjiro made something happen every time. And in the exact location where something happening felt most surprising. The high school dance club ecosystem in Japan is something that Western audiences have almost no frame of reference for, and it is central to understanding how Ginjiro's platform grew the way it did. Japanese high school dance clubs operate at a level of technical and creative seriousness that goes far beyond what the phrase school club suggests to most Americans. These are students who train daily, compete nationally, and develop choreography with a rigor that would embarrass many professional dance companies. What they historically lacked was not skill, it was reach. Their performances happened at competitions and festivals with limited audiences. The internet existed, but the format for translating their work into something viral had not been invented yet. Ginjiro invented it for them. The Yurigaoka High School Dance Club, the Suganami Gakuin Dance Club, the Eiwa High School Dance Club, dozens of institutions across Japan whose students became globally watched performers through his videos. He did not treat these collaborations as content extraction. He treated them as the content itself. The clubs were the stars. He was the architect of the moment that let the world see them. The result was an ecosystem rather than a personal brand. A community of schools, students, and choreographers whose work collectively built his platform, while his platform collectively built their audiences. In the attention economy, that kind of genuine reciprocity is rare enough to be almost unrecognizable. By 2024, the ecosystem had crossed its first major international border. And it crossed it somewhere that surprised people who were not paying close attention. Not the United States, not the United Kingdom. Indonesia. The Indonesian audience found Ginjiro with a commitment that stood apart from any other international fan base he had developed. The specificity of that connection deserves a moment. Indonesia has one of the largest populations of TikTok users on Earth. It also has a youth culture that places enormous value on communal joy, on music as a social event, on the kind of spontaneous collective expression that Ginjiro's format captures perfectly. When his content reached Indonesian audiences, it did not just perform well. It resonated in a way that felt personal. He acknowledged it directly, incorporating Indonesian viral tracks into his classroom videos and building a reciprocal cultural exchange that the algorithm was genuinely not designed to facilitate but facilitated anyway. Japanese students learning Indonesian choreography, Indonesian fans sending his clips back through their own networks. Two cultures that have historically had very limited pop culture overlap, discovering that a man with a camera and a carefully constructed sense of timing could bridge them in ways that no diplomatic or media institution had managed. Then 2025 arrived, and the scale of his collaborations began to reflect the actual size of the cultural territory he had been quietly occupying. K-pop entered the picture. In February 2026, Ginjiro released a collaboration with STAYC, the South Korean girl group, performing choreography for a Brazilian phonk track called No Batidão by RIZZ and STAYC. Pause on that combination for a moment, because it contains a full thesis about what the internet is actually capable of when a trusted format meets a trusted creator. A Brazilian phonk track, a K-pop act with an established global fan base, a Japanese content creator whose audience spans 3 continents, a high school classroom in Tokyo, 44 million views in 4 days across TikTok and Instagram. No single element of that collaboration is sufficient to explain the result. The phonk track did not produce those numbers alone. STAYC's existing fan base did not produce those numbers alone. Ginjiro's followers did not produce those numbers alone. The result came from the intersection of 3 distinct cultural audiences who arrived through 3 completely different doors and found themselves watching the same thing at the same time and feeling the same thing. That is not a coincidence of reach. That is a consequence of format. The architecture Ginjiro built was open enough to hold all of them simultaneously. 4 million followers, over 170 million likes accumulated across years of consistent work. A collaborator list that now spans Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, and Brazil, with every indication that it is not finished expanding. A format replicated by creators in a dozen countries who understood the structure even when they had never heard the name behind it. Here's what makes Ginjiro's story worth telling in 2026 specifically. The conversation around viral dance culture is almost entirely dominated by American and Korean frameworks. Charleston's, TikTok challenges, K-pop choreography challenges. The assumption embedded in most cultural coverage is that viral dance moves in one direction, from established entertainment centers outward to the rest of the world. Ginjiro is evidence that the map is wrong, that a man from a small city in Hyogo Prefecture, working with high school students in ordinary classrooms using a format no one had built before, can originate something that travels in every direction at once and lands in every culture it touches with the same force. He did not chase virality. He built a room that virality kept wanting to walk into. And every time it did, the music dropped, and the whole world caught it.